Poohniverse continues with Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, but could it be any better than the first? Hey everyone, welcome to Cinema, where we focus on the film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below if you've seen Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, or if you're just gonna skip it altogether or waiting for this review to help you decide if you're going to see it or not. And just going into the synopsis. Years after a 100-acre wood massacre from the first film, Christopher Robin is left all alone as he's facing the trials of being blamed for those murders. And Pooh is left alone, but then gathers Tigger and Owl to gather up vengeance against Christopher Robin and the people. Starting off with the positives, going into the story, it does have a bit more substance, and knowing what it's going after, it takes itself seriously in the way that it's building up these characters, in a way that fleshes out Christopher Robin, having people be against him, and having the neighborhood not really having taste with him because of the idea that these imaginary friends or whatnot are going up against him, and just the way they go about that, the energy and vibe, it creates this horror aspect that becomes compelling in some interesting motives, and the kills throughout are rather decent for how they're pulling them off. The energy and setting you get taken into, it's a lot more exploratory to the town itself, expands upon not just being centered in the woods, and so the way they expand on certain aspects of the setting, certain characters, and even expanding on how many characters there are in general, it opens up many ideas for what they have to go for. And Tigger and Owl as an addition create a great aspect to where you're finally getting new characters, understanding there's more that's going to come, which takes me into some of the mixed aspects where this is obviously something that's trying to set up something else, something bigger, and while that can be good and have payoff once those characters show up within future films, it just separates what the franchise has, who the characters are involved with this franchise from the actual Disney films to what they're bringing here, and it doesn't necessarily take too much away from what this story has to offer. And so that's why I'm putting it in a mix. It could be bad or could be good for you, but just the general gist that goes into certain areas that could be explored more, and some aspects to the characters are not as compelling. They don't go all the way with the depth that you're getting with Christopher Robin being separated from people and society in some sort of sense, because he's still in the neighborhood, still blamed for things, but it feels like there could be more trauma explored behind that, or how they're comparing him versus what Pooh is going through, because there is a distinction, and yet they try and make it seem just about the same for what they're going through, the exposition and the dialogue, and the way they go about that is compelling. And also going into the aspect of Owl and Tigger, Owl is fine for his design. Obviously, they couldn't go too much into creating an owl. It's obviously creating humanized versions of them, and so it can be an iffy look to Owl, but for the most part, they had good aspects, good effects when he was actually flying throughout. But going into the negatives, we first got to talk about Tigger, who, for me, was too similar in design to Pooh, and not in the sense where their colors are similar and everything, whatnot, but there are so many close glimpses or dark scenes where he was coming in, and by the shadow or the silhouette of him alone was too dark to distinguish, that you couldn't quite tell if you didn't see the tail upon him. And so the design was a subtle look, and that makes it more realistic, and I'm sure the costume looks great, but that leads into there being so many dark scenes that, yes, it can work well for a horror franchise, but the way they pulled it off in this scene, I could hardly tell what was going on for certain scenes or certain sequences where it could have been a lot more compelling, especially with the kills that they're pulling off with that. You didn't necessarily get a gist of how well or how effective, or get to appreciate what they're doing with the blood smelling and everything that went along with that, getting mixed up with some of the kills of Pooh or Tigger and how Owl was mixed in with that, while I still do love the narrative tropes for what they're doing, the compelling narrative was not delivering all the way because of how absent and shallow some of these characters were, how they didn't go all the way with Christopher Robin or certain aspects, and just the confusing nature of it all didn't deliver on a way that I expected or would have wanted it to, because of the nature of the town, how they're going against them, and it went into random areas that I didn't feel like the story needed to go. I wasn't emotionally attached to a certain character or a certain big party scene near the end of the film that, even though you got a particular amount of kills that made it bloody and gorier, it didn't have the payoff that I really would have been enriched with if I had initially loved the characters, or if it went with a more straightforward route that would have delivered. And that also leads into some of the writing issues, certain horror tropes that are written in that certain characters go into places they shouldn't, or follow about different things that you can kind of expect from a certain amount of horror films, but still doesn't make it any better for the believability or how they're going about adding on to what these characters mean. And so I couldn't necessarily sympathize with the situation or how they're going about all of these antics that were going on throughout, and therefore I have to rate it a simply 2.5 out of 10, where I just am not vibing with this film as much as I did with my first film. And so let me know down in the comments below what you thought of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, or if you're going to see it because of this review, or avoiding it like the plague. So that's just all. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.